That night, when I stepped into the gala ballroom, I was already a forgotten figure to the people who supposedly knew me best. No one noticed me as I crossed the marble entrance alone, not my parents, not my sister Isabelle, dazzling in her designer gown, nor my cousins, huddled at the champagne bar, whispering about promotions and career cycles. To them, I was still the woman who didn't work out, the sister who failed, the one who drifted away from family business dinners with quiet smiles and unpaid parking tickets. What they didn't know was that, far from their gaze, I had built something. Something too quiet to be posted on Facebook, too grand to need applause. At that event, lights flickered over crystal flutes, and people posed for photos under banners bearing Isabelle's company name, a rising star in consumer data intelligence. The same company that, one day, I believed in more than she ever would. I wasn't wearing a shimmering dress or shoes that clattered across the ballroom floor. But when the CEO paused on stage, his eyes scanning the crowd to find me, the donor they'd praised in whispers all night, the entire room turned. And Isabelle, my golden sister, blinked in confusion as the spotlight fell not on her, but on me. It was in that instant that everything began to change. Growing up in the Carter household meant living under fluorescent lights and heavy expectations. My father was a regional banking executive, the kind of man who ironed his newspaper before reading it. My mother kept our home impeccable and our shame silent. Perfection wasn't praised, it was demanded. And in that world, success had a dress code, a resume, and a 5-year plan, laminated at 16. Isabelle, my younger sister, thrived in that environment. She earned straight A's, wore pearls to brunch at 17, and spoke as if she'd had a publicist since birth. She was everything the Carter legacy wanted, polished, dependable, impeccable. I, on the other hand, questioned things. I pursued computer science and design when my parents preferred finance. I interned at startups instead of the family's preferred corporate ladder. I didn't want to follow a legacy, I wanted to build something that had never existed before. I launched my first startup at 27. It failed at 30. It wasn't a dramatic collapse, no headlines, no lawsuits. Just a slow erosion, burn rate climbing, investor confidence shrinking, me working 18-hour days, trying to fix innovation with payroll cash. When it was all over, I stood amidst the rubble of a dream and watched people I trusted quietly walk away, especially my parents. The night it all fell apart, Isabelle invited me to her birthday dinner. I arrived exhausted, my heart still clinging to a pitch deck I tossed out that morning. Everyone else arrived in vibrant pastels and full of confidence. I sat in a corner, nursing a glass of flat white wine. Mid-appetizers, my mother leaned over to me and asked, not unkindly, "Are you all right, darling? Is something going on, or are you just catching your breath before you try another thing again?" That was code for, "Are you done embarrassing us yet?" I remember blinking at my plate, the untouched scallop suddenly too perfect to eat. "I'm figuring it out," I said. "It's a transition." "Of course," my father added, as if speaking of a case study. "These things happen. Not everyone is born to lead." Isabelle gave me a look I'll never forget. It wasn't arrogance, nor cruelty, just a resignation, as if she'd finally accepted I was the cautionary tale. It was that night that I stopped seeking their approval. I realized they didn't want to understand me, they wanted to contain me. And failure had given them the box they always needed to close the lid on me completely. So, I disappeared. Not physically. I still showed up for holidays, sent polite replies to family group chats, mailed birthday gifts. But emotionally, strategically, I moved underground. I stopped explaining what I was doing. I stopped asking for interest, attention, or approval. I let them keep the version of me they found easier to manage. And while they saw quietness, I was in motion. I took everything I'd learned, the bruises, the burnouts, the betrayed NDAs, and started again. Not to prove them wrong, not at first. I did it because I couldn't stop building. It's who I am. I began consulting behind the scenes for early-stage ventures, investing quietly through a legal entity under a neutral name. I created Genesis Syndicate first, then restructured to Carter Meridian Ventures, never attaching my first name, never giving anyone a chance to track it back to the failed sister. One by one, the companies I backed began to grow. One of them, Ascend Analytics, stood out, a clean data analytics startup with aggressive growth potential, led by a founder who was not only hungry but adaptable. They needed capital, they needed time, and they needed a chief marketing officer who understood consumer behavior and public image. They hired Isabelle. I never said a word. I watched from the shadows as the company bloomed, as Isabelle proudly announced their progress at dinners and press interviews. She spoke of their success in terms so glowing you'd think she'd been there from day one. Maybe she believed she had. Maybe she thought she was the reason things moved forward. She never asked who had secured the Series A round that saved them 18 months ago, or who had doubled their bridge funding when the first client defaulted. She never imagined it could be me. And I was fine with that, until the gala invitation arrived in the mail, an elegant black envelope with silver edges, honoring our partners past, present, and future. My name wasn't listed, just a +1 for my parents, a nod to family, not inclusion. Still, I RSVP'd. Not to be seen, not to make a scene, but because some stories don't need to be told, only revealed. There's a strange freedom that comes from being underestimated. People don't police their conversations around you. They assume your presence is harmless, your intentions irrelevant. It makes the shadows a surprisingly efficient place to work, quiet, steady, undetectable. After I broke free from my family's expectations and the public embarrassment of my failed startup, I rebuilt myself with purpose. Not for redemption, not for applause, but to understand value, the kind that isn't listed on resumes or shouted across dinner tables. I started consulting. At first, it was small, struggling early-stage founders desperate for advice on fundraising, market fit, co-founder crisis management. I didn't put my name on websites, didn't take equity. I wanted insight, patterns, proof. In time, the founders I helped began calling me back. Not for advice, but for money. And so, I formed Carter Meridian Ventures. I chose the name carefully. Professional, forgettable, impossible to directly link back to me. The entity was legally separate from anything personal, routed through holding companies that never used the words Audrey or sister. I became a silent partner in a dozen ventures, but only 2 truly mattered. One failed quickly, the other was Ascend Analytics. When their founding team approached me, they'd already burned through their first seed round. The product was good, elegant, scalable, efficient. But their user data had flatlined, and investors circled like vultures, sniffing out signs of mismanagement. I saw something different. Their CEO, Caleb Stone, didn't boast or sell illusions. He sent me raw documents, admitted mistakes, and described how he'd fix them. I wired the funds within 48 hours. 3 months later, the CMO unexpectedly resigned. I watched the hiring updates from afar. It took me a moment to recognize the name when they announced it, Isabelle Carter. It almost felt like a joke, but there she was, my sister, stepping into a leadership role at a company that only existed because I'd kept the lights on. At first, I considered pulling my investment, not out of spite, but because I didn't want proximity. I didn't want to invite the ghosts of comparison or resentment. But the math was clear, the market was heating up, Isabelle's track record in brand partnerships was solid, and frankly, I wasn't going to disrupt a company's trajectory just to keep my past tidy. I stayed. I watched Isabelle reframe the company's messaging. I watched her close 3 major clients and be featured in Forbes Next. I even saw a picture of her next to Caleb on a rooftop with the caption, "The dynamic team behind Ascend's exponential rise." She looked proud, the kind of proud that doesn't ask where the scaffolding came from. Once, I caught a snippet of her on a podcast talking about leadership. "You have to know who's in the room," she said, "who believes in the mission, who takes the risks." I almost laughed. I wondered if she ever wondered who saved payroll in January, if she ever looked at the cap table closely enough to see the percentage held by Carter Meridian Ventures. Or perhaps, like so many others, she assumed Summit Partners, our partner firm, was the real power behind it all. She never knew I sat in on 2 quarterly board calls under an assumed name, that when her marketing team requested an emergency budget extension last spring, I was one of 3 people who approved it. I told myself I didn't care, that it was better this way. Let them believe what they needed to, let her think she rose on her own. And perhaps I would have kept it that way, if the gala event hadn't happened. When the invitation arrived, I stared at the envelope longer than I should have. It was beautiful, silver embossed, like something from a royal wedding. Inside, the letter thanked key partners for their support and invited distinguished contributors to attend a private ceremony honoring those who made Ascend success possible. There was a line at the bottom: "Names will not be disclosed until the night of the event to preserve the impact of the recognition." I knew what that meant. They were going to say my name. Maybe not all of it, but enough. I wasn't sure how I felt. Not excited. Just calm. It wasn't about being seen anymore. It was about the quiet joy of a full circle, of knowing I never needed to fight for a seat at their table, because I had built my own. And now, they were helping themselves to it. I bought a ticket, chose a simple black dress that didn't demand attention, and made a promise to myself, I wouldn't say a word. Not even if they finally looked at me. Not even if they apologized. The truth no longer needed my voice. It had already taken the stage. The event was held in a private hall near Park Avenue, one of those buildings where the carpets muffle your steps and the chandeliers never stop glittering. I arrived early, not to be seen, but to observe. The space was already vibrant with movement. Waiters in impeccable uniforms passed trays of champagne. Investors mingled near screens displaying Ascend's growth charts. Isabelle was near the center, in an elegant ivory silk dress, her hair swept up in a bun I recognized from old debutante photos. She was radiant, smiling, commanding the room the way she'd always been taught to. My parents were there too. My father in his sharpest navy suit, my mother wrapped in emerald silk. I watched them greet other guests with the same pride they used to reserve for Isabelle's report cards. They didn't notice me. They walked past me twice. It was liberating. I chose a table in the back, near the wall. From there, I could see the stage, the crowd, the hum of voices. No one looked twice at me. I could have been a consultant, a vendor, a +1 who got lost. It didn't matter. This was the power of invisibility, and tonight, it was working for me. The evening began with polished speeches, numbers, milestones, sculpted gratitude. Isabelle gave a brief address, thanking mentors and advisors, reserving her greatest thanks for the audacious vision of our founding team and the incredible capital partners who believed in us before we were anyone. I tilted my head slightly. She didn't know I was there. She didn't know she was talking about me. Then Caleb Stone walked onto the stage. Calm, confident in a charcoal gray suit that needed no ostentation. He spoke differently, less performative, more grounded. He thanked the board, acknowledged the roller coaster of the early years, and then paused. And tonight, he said, we're doing something special. We've never publicly named this person. We never needed to. But they believed in us when most doors were closed. Their trust gave us not just survival, but a runway. And their silence, ironically, taught us the value of true partnership. There was an instant of silence, a subtle shift in the room. He smiled and continued, you may not know them, but you should. Because, without them, we wouldn't be here. So, tonight, we're honoring our greatest private investor, the one behind Carter Meridian Ventures. My name hadn't been spoken yet, but the murmurs began. Isabelle's smile twitched. My parents exchanged a look. Then Caleb said, Audrey Carter. It didn't echo. It didn't need to. It hit like a stone in still water. Chairs scraped, heads swiveled. Isabelle looked to the back, blinking. My father remained perfectly still. My mother's lips parted in confusion, almost fear. I rose slowly, not dramatically, but deliberately. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't smiling. I didn't wave. I didn't search for their reactions. I walked toward the stage with the calmness of someone who no longer needed anything from that room. Caleb met me halfway and extended his hand. Thank you, he said softly, for everything. I took the microphone only briefly. I believe in quiet builders, I said, and in second chances that don't come with explanations. Thank you for being one. Then, I stepped down, walked back to my table, and sat. I didn't look at Isabelle. Not yet. That moment was still to come. I sat back down at my table, folded my hands in my lap, and exhaled silently. No one joined me, no one dared. The applause had morphed into a strange kind of hush, the kind that lingers when a room has just witnessed something it can't fully process. I could feel their eyes, especially hers. Isabelle didn't move at first. I watched out of the corner of my eye as she remained near the stage, her smile frozen, her body still angled towards the spotlight that had just abandoned her. Then she turned. She moved across the ballroom floor with quick, composed strides, the kind trained for cameras, donors, and press. But her eyes, those weren't composed. They flickered like someone frantically turning pages, trying to catch up to a story she should have read long ago. Audrey, she said when she reached me, her voice low, almost rehearsed. That was unexpected. I looked at her and waited. I didn't feel the silence. She sat down, uninvited, smoothing the satin of her dress with restless hands. You invested? She asked finally. In Ascend. Yes, I said. She blinked. From the beginning. I nodded. Isabelle let out a soft laugh, more disbelief than amusement. Why didn't you say anything? I wasn't asked, I said calmly. She stared at me. But we had dinners, family things. You could have told me. I tilted my head. Would it have mattered? Her mouth opened, then closed. I saw the penny drop in her eyes. Every time she interrupted me, every time she scoffed at my work, every holiday where she recounted her achievements while I cleared dishes no one noticed I brought. She tried again. I just don't understand. Why would you invest in a company I work for and not say anything? I held her gaze. Because I believed in the company, I said. Not in being seen. That silenced her for a second, but Isabelle was always good at recovering. She leaned in slightly. You realize how this looks, right? You let everyone think I failed, that I disappeared. I cut her off. I didn't correct the record, Isabelle, because it wasn't mine to fix. You were all comfortable with the version of me that made you feel superior. I simply saw no point in disrupting your story. Her face wavered. Behind her, I saw our parents watching now. My mother's expression was unreadable. My father clutched his wine glass too tightly. Isabelle's voice was softer now. You actually put in that much money? More than the rest combined. Yes, I replied, not proudly, just factually. She leaned back, as if the words held weight. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. A silence stretched between us, thick with things we would never fully unravel. Then she whispered, I thought you'd given up. I know, I said. That's why it worked. She looked at me then. Not like a sister, not even a rival, but like someone who had underestimated the scale of something right beside her. She looked at me as if I were a stranger who had rewritten the rules of the room. An instant passed. Finally, she asked, "Why now? Why let them name you?" I glanced around the ballroom. Because Caleb asked. And because, frankly, it was time. Isabelle opened her mouth and then stopped. Part of her wanted to regain control, to deflect the spotlight back, but there was no way to do it without looking small. The narrative had already shifted. Everyone had seen what they needed to see. She stood up slowly, recomposing herself. "Are you coming to the family table?" she asked. I stood too. "No. I already have my seat." I nodded once, a simple goodbye. Then I turned and walked past our parents without a glance. My name had already been said. The story had already been told. And I didn't need to explain a single word. I didn't stay for the after applause. I exited through the side door, as quietly as I'd arrived. No one stopped me. That silence was enough. Outside, the city felt quiet. In the car, I opened my phone. A message from Caleb, "Thank you." An email from a founder, a request for mentorship. I smiled. They once said I had no place at the table, but I stopped asking years ago. I built my own, with silence, grit, and memory. Tonight wasn't vengeance, it was recognition. Late, but real. Let them toast and spin stories. I had something more solid, legacy, control, freedom. And now they finally knew that the room they were in only existed because I had silently held it up all along. Thank you for listening to Audrey's story. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share to support us in bringing more inspiring stories, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new releases. See you in the next video.